One of those things that we have to keep in mind is the role of dopamine and on our sons, on our boys' brains. Dopamine is the risk-reward hormone. And I've said throughout that kids haven't really changed, but tools for kids have changed. And when we look at dopamine, that risk-reward hormone, the male brain has always produced more dopamine than the female brain. And dopamine is released at its highest levels during risk-taking behaviors. And we have seen an increase in dopamine in the developing brain. Actually, we've seen quite a big increase in dopamine in the developing brain. And that's influencing these big behaviors that we are seeing. And one of those things that is creating or causing that increase in dopamine is the use of video games. Those game developers, they know exactly what to do to keep that child engaged in that game, to get to that next point, to take that next risk so that you get that burst of dopamine. So our boys are staying up and playing those video games till 2 in the morning, not because they don't need sleep, but they're doing it for the juice. They're doing it for that dopamine. The other time when dopamine is released at high amounts in the male brain is in anticipation of sex. They receive dopamine during the actual act of sex, but they receive more dopamine in anticipation of sex. And so again, keeping and limiting, having boundaries around their use of technology, because we know that pornography is rampant and it feeds that male brain. And dopamine is highly addictive. Keep in mind, in studies, when rats were given the choice between dopamine or methamphetamine, they chose the dopamine every time. When given the choice between dopamine and food, they would choose dopamine to the point of starvation.